Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the X-Force Global channel. Thank you very much for joining me today. Hope you all had a fantastic weekend. I read a few comments that my mic was a bit too low, so I made a small adjustment to the volume gain. Please do let me know if you need it higher, and I will make sure to make that adjustment accordingly for the next video as well to help better your experience as a listener. Now, without any further ado, let's dive into the latest Bitcoin developments and explore how we can readjust the wave counts from our previous analysis. As I must cater to both the bulls and bears, I hope my analysis does show a neutral approach to help build your own thesis on the bearish or bullish outcome. But nevertheless, I do share my probabilities and personal sentiment that is deemed not financial advice. So from our last analysis, our primary expectation was in this possible X wave move to the upside. We're still not entirely out of the woods, as we are still looking for some kind of wave 1 completion or confirmation to the upside, as we still need a wave 2 confirmation to be in place for this impulse to be deemed complete for this wave C of X here. Now, the move up was very confident in regards to breaking a few of the immediate key resistances to kind of invalidate that bearish scenario that we were looking for and that was lingering in the background. So that's a good thing in this case. However, with every minute that passes, there will always be a new alternative being made for any scenario, whether bullish or bearish. But as I'm here to discuss the probabilities, I must make sure that it is organized as best as possible according to my personal views. So what we're looking for, like I said, is a possible 1-2 pullback. Now, we'll go over the medium and the shorter time frames, but we really must look for some kind of wave 2 pullback eventually. If we just continue up, that's even better for the bulls. But again, we still need to make sure whether we're working in this X wave, in a 5-wave manner, we need to have some kind of wave 2 confirmation. Now, if we're looking for a wave 2 confirmation, we're going to be expecting this wave 1 to be quite highly extended in itself. It was a 15% move to the upside. And when you're looking for this wave C, you have kind of a limited upside potential, really thinking about it, unless you're working in a really nested structure and you can count 5 waves. So until we get up into these regions, we won't really know how this 5-wave move is going to be completing for this C wave. But nevertheless, we're still expecting some kind of wave 2 to eventually be completed on the micro time frames, and we need some kind of consolidation of some sort, whether it is a sharp or a sideways move. We can make those solid adjustments as time goes on. But for the time being, as the data is being created and what data we have right now to work with, we're looking for some kind of wave 2 pullback, whether it's going to be sideways, like I said, or kind of a deeper retracement for a wave 2, so that we can reach, at least retest some of the major Fibonacci's, or at least the minimum Fibonacci of the 236 or 382. So when we do that, we're going to be working for this wave 3 for the following of the wave 2. Look for a small retracement of the wave 4. Preferably as a sideways wave 4, and then look for that wave 5 completion up into these regions of the 600 or the 70%, so that we can create some kind of equilibrium zone. And then we're looking for some kind of zigzag, a triangle, or some kind of flat of some sort in order to complete this Y wave of this possible combo that we're looking for. But I think many people didn't assume that this move off the lows was going to be happening. But if we are able to take this A wave Fibonacci and then take that for a B pocket expanded zone anywhere between the 101 to the 138%, this was a good fake out zone, and we were able to identify that this was possibly in some kind of ABC expanded flat due to the complete and consistent readjustments of our wave counts. We originally assumed this as a possible wave 1, but we immediately saw the signal of reversal, and then we readjusted this count as an ABC into a wave A. Same thing here. We originally thought this was going to be a wave 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the bear scenario, but we were able to identify that as well and change this into an AB and then C wave to the downside that was sharp. And really, that was a great move, really quick and swift to help mitigate some of the inconsistencies. If this wave C was going to be playing out longer, that would have given this move here a little bit more difficulty in terms of how the transition could have been working. So we got this ABC move down quite clearly, and the A to the C ratio hit that 1.618 pretty on spot, and that landed us into that 1.382 to 1.236 zone, which is a very common target for the expanded B pocket. And then we got a really sharp reversal in a 15% move, breaking this previous wave 1, previous wave 1 of the bearish scenario, invalidating those nested 1-2 structures. And then now we're moving here and we're still looking for how this wave X is going to be playing out. So again, we're just looking for some kind of wave 2 pullback of some sort. The shorter it is, we're going to be looking at even a possible more bullish scenario, ladies and gentlemen, because we ideally want to have some kind of clear wave 2 pullback, and this wave 3, actually, it really doesn't matter as long as this wave 3 is going to be ending and we have some kind of clear confirmation of a wave 3. We can kind of confirm those later on at a later date, and maybe we'll end that wave 3 with some kind of divergences being made on the really micro time frames to help complete that wave 3, wave 4, and then 5. And then we can see whether this is even going to be playing out. So if in the case that doesn't play out and we continue to impulse even further, we can come back to the idea of possibly validating this double zigzag scenario where we have 2 zigzags being completed for waves W and wave Y, and we had a high wave X that we're just going to have to deem as accepted. Now, I originally noted that this wave X hitting the 90% as a wave X made this as kind of unlikely for having this as a zigzag, just due to the fact that this was a hybrid scenario and overlapping with a possible flat idea or some kind of combo idea, and we want to be utilizing the waves in a much more useful fashion in terms of building the probabilities. But now that we have built a pretty solid impulses off the low and a pretty strong bounce, breaking these previous strong resistances, this comes back into play, making me think that this may be even a more bullish outcome, where we're just looking for even further upside, either as a wave 1 where it just continues to nest and we don't even have to have a real shallow 1 or a deep 1-2 at this current state. If this continues up, this is now becoming very highly possible that we come up here, break these regions, come as a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, breaking up into all-time highs, and then we're creating a wave 5 of some sort. This should be labeled wave 4. And then we can be looking for that completion of this bull market, as this is the expectation of a completion of some kind of fifth at these regions here. Now, in order for this to happen, we can all ideally even say that even for this wave 1-2, if this wave 1-2 is going to be created with this wick right here, we can say that this is still going to be another hybrid scenario of that X wave and complete our move. So it's just the small micro time frames and how these wave 5s or 5-wave moves of these motive waves going to be completed, and whether we just get rejected from here, we can expect the price to come back down. Then we can confirm whether that wave Y is going to be being played, or we continue as an impulse. But nevertheless, the impulse off the lows does show good strength, confidence for any of the scenarios of the bullish scenarios. We're just looking for confirmation of either a wave 1-2 being built from these levels, or a 1-2 that's going to be higher, and we don't go as deep and we just create a wave 1-2 here above these regional highs here, because we do expect some kind of rejection within these regions, right? And then once we get that wave 2, we can confirm this scenario being in play. Now, what if we come up and we get rejected from these levels? Well, there is a bearish scenario that we do have to take into consideration, which is a possible new diagonal that is being made here. Now, again, this idea fits on the larger time frames of a possible flat idea that is being created on the larger time frames. Now, again, I did mention in the previous macro analysis, which is the previous video right before this, that I mentioned that it's going to be a long time and a long bearish continuation, at least in the same caliber or time of this here. We won't really know until we create that first wave, and the only way I can create that first wave for the time being is this possible diagonal scenario. Now, for this diagonal scenario, all we have to do is readjust the counts, readjust the internal counts, utilize them as best as we can for how this can fit into a diagonal. Now, this diagonal does still require some kind of impulsive move to, or rather a corrective move to the upside for a wave 2 in order to complete this. And if we do come back for a diagonal, in the case this is even a diagonal in the first place, is that we still need a 5-3-5 in order to complete this wave 2, and that still leads us to higher levels before we actually consider that we're going to be rejected at major Fibonacci levels of this move here to this move down here, and then we find whether that Fibonacci resistance is going to be rejected, and we come back down in a very swift manner, as our wave 3 is going to be expected to be even stronger than what we had previously anticipated. So whatever happens here, I think for now, in terms of this diagonal being created, this is the only bearish scenario that I have in mind that is of high probability. So there are maybe some other nested 1-2 structures being created that I just don't want to kind of explain at this time, because a lot of the bearish scenarios have been invalidated and they had a lot of chances for this to happen in this region here before we could have continued to the downside, but that didn't happen. Now, speaking of this diagonal being created, what we have is 3 waves into a wave 1, subwave 1. We have a 3 wave into 2, and then we also have this as the larger wave 3 subwave. So this is now utilized from that double zigzag scenario. This zigzag here can be utilized within this diagonal scenario. So what we're looking for here is, this is obviously some kind of impulse. It's very difficult for me to count on the micro time frames that this is an ABC to the upside. So if you look at 2 videos ago, I did talk about there was a possible triangle being built for wave B, and we could have ended that C wave here for the other diagonal scenario, but that didn't happen, right? So this is why it gets very tricky for these diagonals. But the larger it is, we're looking for some kind of ABC of some kind of move to the upside, as this does look impulsive, right? So there's no doubt that this is an impulse move, but the further we move down, the better it is that it's going to give a better chance as we come up one more time, and that will be a confirmation of a possible short being in play, and then we can come back down to retest these lows one more time, as these 2 trend lines are very, very important. But again, as this was our original diagonal of a possibility, this is also possible where we had this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right, which came down and broke out of the trend line, but that is not really my ideal scenario where we had an overshoot over the trend line. Just makes more sense to have this as the bearish scenario with the readjustment. We want to create the best look for a diagonal of some sort, and I think this is the only bearish scenario that we can keep in mind. But nevertheless, there is that possibility where we can say the diagonal has already finished with some kind of overshoot in mind, thinking that maybe this diagonal was in play before we came up to the upside and broke this. So ideally for this bearish scenario, if this were to play out and we did do an overshoot of some sort, we could say that this was the 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, have this as the ABC, ending that 5th wave, and we can ideally say that this was going to be a wave 1 instead of that larger diagonal that we're expecting. 1, this could be the impulse of the A, B, C, 2, 3, 4, 5. So essentially what we're looking for is that B wave and then C and then to the downside. So this is also another alternative scenario for that diagonal idea, but I just don't like how this is going to be fitting on the larger time frames. But either way, it's still there. Nothing is in take. We don't know what's going to be happening in the current price action. But again, this is the ABC that we're going to be looking for. And this idea is also overlapping with that possible 1-2 scenario, depending on how far this impulse is, depending on if we create some kind of 1-to-1 ratio with that A to C. That'll give us a little bit of a clear picture on how this bearish scenario could be playing out if this is the alternative scenario to be in play. But for the time being, what I like to see is this idea where we create another possible wave 4, 5, and then a larger 1-2, and that gives me a little bit more confidence that maybe the markets are still resilient in terms of the bears coming into play. They're looking for liquidity sweeps, liquidity sweeps, and another liquidity sweep. Then we'll have that what's called a market exhaustion, where bulls can't continue to keep buying up the dips, and they can't continue buying the dips here. Maybe the leverage or perpetual traders will take up the rest of the case here, and then we can come back down. Spot traders will use this advantage as a profit-taking zone because they are not confident enough to bring the price back up into these regions, and everyone is already positioned as is. So that's that. If we're going to look for any of these scenarios to come into play, again, we're looking for confirmation of a possible 1-2, as I've said, and diving into the more shorter time frames, like I've said, this is probably the only way that I'm able to count this. It's still very tricky in terms of how we can look at this move up. Now, for me personally, I have this 1-2 as a very really looking odd flat, but it is what it is. The B wave came up and hit that 1618, and we did hit that kind of running flat area where we just didn't break the low. We can label this as a 1-2, this as the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We do have a pretty clear 5th wave extension being placed here. To be honest, it doesn't really matter where you place these internal structures until the whole structure is actually made, until we have a larger kind of corrective move being played, which looks like it's about to happen for this wave 1. And with this move here, to me, is a completed wave 5. This is the top of that wave 1 I was expecting. And now this could be some kind of flat scenario being in play. So what we're essentially looking for is that 5, and then 3, 4, 5 coming in, and then we could be completing this possible wave 5 for a C wave of expanded flat of some idea. We just don't know how it's going to play, but again, the idea is there. Now this could be that 1, 2, where we're creating not as deep of a wave 1, 2 that can come down all the way down to the 618 to the 786, but rather we're creating some kind of sideways 1, 2 once again, and then we're coming up for that wave 3, 4, 5 to complete that C wave of that X, and then we can continue thinking about whether the X play is going to be coming into the works, or completing as a double zigzag where we are continuing higher, have that shorter time frame play out as even further as possible, because there is a possibility where wave 3 could have ended here, where wave 3 of this degree has ended up in here, because this 3, 4, 5 of this degree could be complete because of this. There was a possible high that has been higher than this region over here. So we can say that this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That was the extension of this wave here. And now wave 3, 4, this alternatively could be that running flat idea where we ended here at the time of recording, come down as well over here, complete that ABC where it doesn't break really into this region. You know, it doesn't have to, but it shouldn't. And this wave 4 could be complete, and we're working for wave 5. That will be the wave 1, and that could be fitting into that double zigzag scenario as well. So really nothing to talk about too much on the shorter time frame. It's difficult as is. So we really just want to see how the price action is going to be consolidating. So that is the way we can organize it, right? We're going to have to look at our expectations, and that's why I have organized it in this kind of fashion. And to manage that scenario, the scenarios that I have presented with the current data, the number one thing you want to be asking yourself is, are we in the end of something, the middle of something, or the beginning of something? Now, what I mean by that is, are we in the end of something, for example, of wave 4 of a double zigzag, or are we in the middle of something with a possible wave X, or are we in the beginning of something, which is the bearish scenario of that possible diagonals to being created? So this is the beginning of something. So those are kind of the weighted scenarios that you have to take into consideration. Okay, in my opinion, I believe we are in the middle of something, and then the second idea is that we're in the end of something with a double zigzag scenario where we just continue to all-time highs. So that beginning of something is something to keep in mind, but it's not something to be worried about. You have to know how to expect those managed scenarios. Now, the second thing is the impulse off of the lows an impulse into a wave 1 or a wave A? That is something that you also have to take into consideration. What I just showed you, is that into a wave 1 or is that into a wave A of some sort? Is that able to fit into that bearish scenario of that wave A, B, C? Who knows? But it's definitely not some kind of ABC to the upside. It's more of the beginning of an ABC of a possible corrective scenario. We just don't know. So is it this impulse off of the lows considered a wave 1 or a wave A? That's something else you have to consider when you're narrowing down the scenarios. Now, what about the scenarios overall? Does the double zigzag, this scenario here, have more weight, or does the combo have more weight? To me personally, like I said, I like to utilize this as the possible flat idea where this is going into wave W, and just due to the fact that we went into that 1382, I like to consider this as a fake out scenario where we come in for wave X and then we correct a little bit longer and possibly create that wave Y. That is just my personal idea. But again, we can readjust it because a lot of the hybridness of the wave counts come into play. Now, does a double zigzag have more weight? Absolutely, could be. Because what you're doing here is you're still using a valid scenario. You're utilizing this as the zigzag rather, and that is the end of something of this possible WXY. So those are the two things that you want to be looking at. These are now, I believe those are the only two scenarios that we can really put weight. Just depends on this second move here on how this pullback is going to be happening. The higher we go up, the better it is for this scenario to be validated. The more we consolidate here, the idea of this still being in weight is possible, or we continue with that X wave idea. But for me, I like to be cautious, and I like to approach the markets a little bit more cautiously. Possible X wave, and then we reach that 70 to the 72K region, and then we come back down for a wave Y. But doesn't really matter. We're all bullish in the end, right? We're looking for the expectation of a continuation to the all-time highs as some kind of move, whether it is a little bit later in time or whether it is now. Those are the only two things of expectation that you need. And again, is it the beginning of something, the end of something, or in the middle of something? So that's how I'm going to end the video here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining. If you want to join the X-Force Global Discord membership, that where I do more daily updates, in-depth, and more micro time frames, please join me for the membership and contact me with the link in the description below. And if you're not following me on social media already, please do follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, @XForceGlobal. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you very much. Goodbye.